Dr. Eric Berne, psychiatrist, developer of transactional analysis, and author of The Games People Play. This slim volume, detailing Dr. Berne's theories, has struck a responsive chord in our society, selling over 500,000 copies since its publication in 1964. Written more for practicing analysts than laymen, the book presents a theory of social relationships that apparently has been easily understood and quickly absorbed by the questioning adult. I'm David Prowett, science editor for National Educational Television. Dr. Berne invited me to his home in Carmel on the California coast. There, over the course of the weekend, we were able to discuss the implications of the theory and practice of the games people play. Why do you think that a book that was originally written for, well, certainly a professional audience, found such favor with lay readers?
I think it's the recognition factor. It's written in language, although it is written for professionals, it happens that we are able to talk about psychological things in very simple words. In fact, we like to stick as much as possible to a basic English vocabulary, and we are able to do it. And so people can understand what it's about, and then they recognize that this has a certain, they can see the reality of it in what happens to them and to other people. And so really there seem to be two kinds of readers, judging from the reactions that I get. One is the person who says, gee whiz, that's me, and the other is the person who says, gee whiz, that's you, or him, or her.
When did you start to write it?
I started about 4 years ago. Actually, I started working on the concept about 12 years ago. But about 4 years ago, some of my colleagues who are using transactional analysis in their professional work want to know more about games, and they said, why don't you write up a catalog of games so we'll be able to refer to it, and that's really how I came to write the book.
Dr. Berne, in a nutshell, what is transactional analysis?
It's a system for understanding people's behavior, for trying to change people's behavior, and for predicting people's behavior.
At the risk of pinning you up against a wall, how is transactional analysis different from other forms of analysis?
I think the main difference seems to be that it's in simple language. And, for instance, a lot of the reviews of the book have said this is written for laymen, as a sort of a derogatory kind of criticism. Mm-hmm. Well, it wasn't written for laymen, it was written for professionals, but it just happens that it is possible to say very complicated things about human beings in simple language.
Well, does transactional analysis conflict with any of the existing forms?
No, it doesn't conflict at all. In fact, it supplements them, and it forms a, let's say, a basis for using any of the others. It's a very good preparation for any of the others.
Does it overturn any of the earlier theories?
Not at all. It merely approaches things from a different angle and adds to the whole body of psychological theory.
Transactional analysis seems like a much more pragmatic approach.
Yes, it is. I think most other therapies talk about thinking and feeling, and our question of the patient is not what do you think or how do you feel, but what are you going to do about it? And there's a story that I think is a little unfair, but anyway, it sort of illustrates what I mean, where the patient came in one day and said to the psychiatrist, by the way, I killed my wife last night and hid her body in the closet. And some people might say, aha, now we got something to work with. What's your interest in closets? Or we might say, why are you killing your wife?
Dr. Berne, I'm curious. Do you practice what you preach? Has transactional analysis been applied to your life?
I think so. At the beginning, you have to say, like, what's my parent, adult, child doing? And pretty soon it becomes a sort of a second nature, except when something specifically goes wrong, like in raising children, for instance, with a teenager. You sort of make mistakes, and then sometimes I really run that through and say, what did I do? And I may decide, gee whiz, I thought I was coming on straight adult, but I guess there was a lot of parent in there, so that's why he reacted the way he did. And so then I try to correct it. And very often when things go wrong, I find it comes in very handy in my own life. And then there are other aspects besides parent, adult, child. For instance, one of the things that people find strange in our philosophy is the idea of rackets. For instance, the idea that anger is a racket, which means really there's no reason to get angry. And there never is. One of the things about feelings that people talk about is the mythic. For instance, in the case of fear, people talk about the mythical man who is chased by a lion, and if you're scared, the adrenaline comes out and you're going to run faster. Well, that sounds great, except that I've asked many, many people, and I've never yet met anybody who was chased by a lion, so I don't know what good that is. Well, in the case of anger, every once in a while I decide to get angry, and it never pays off, and I can see really that what I've done is a sort of self-indulgence, that it's sort of fun to get angry and makes you feel that you're right and like that, so you wait around for a legitimate excuse, like anybody would get angry at that, and then you get angry and you feel very self-righteous, but it never does any good, and it is a racket. So I don't very often decide to get angry nowadays. Sometimes if I'm taken by surprise, I even get angry without deciding to, but it never really is any good.
That's a great philosophy, but what do you do if you can't decide to get angry? You just get angry.
You don't get angry, you decide. What you got to do is keep your adult on the ball, because anger is always a child or a parent phenomenon. And there's no reason for an adult, in our sense of the word, to get angry. So you keep your adult on the ball, and there are several things you can do instead of getting angry. You can say, what's with him? And what can I do about it? And then it's sort of fun. Like if somebody's irritating you, instead of letting them win, which they do if you get irritated, you say, why is he trying to irritate me? And I bet I can calm him down. And then you have an interesting little project. And if you carry through with it, everybody feels good instead of everybody feeling bad. You feel bad because you're angry and you're all stirred up, and he feels bad because he collected an anger stamp from you. So you just have this little project, and that takes care of it, and everybody feels good. That's the ideal, I think.
In the three ego states, these roles that we all play constantly, are they present in all of us all of the time?
Yes, they are, except I want to take exception to your use of the word roles, because these are not roles. These are psychological realities. A role is sort of an artificial thing. It's not straight. And these are not roles. They are actual people in your head. Anyway, in answer to your question, they are there all the time. Usually only one of them is active at a given time, and the others are kind of out of commission until something puts them back into commission.
Well, are the ego states sequential? First the child when we're children, the adult when we reach adulthood, and finally the parent when we become parents?
Something like that. The baby starts off with only a child ego state. And then as he goes along, the first thing that happens, I think, is the first adult thing that happens is when he draws what is essentially a scientific conclusion. Now, various people might say it's a conditioned reflex and so on, but to us it looks like a scientific conclusion. And this scientific conclusion is that the breast is not a part of me. And that's very much like somebody doing research and deciding this is not part of me. Is it part of me or isn't it? So that's the first adult functioning, and that can happen very young in the baby, obviously, in the first couple of months of life. And from then on, he's beginning to use his adult. I think the parent comes later, but not. You don't have to wait till you're an actual parent to become parental. What happens, I think, in my observations, which are fairly limited, but I think the ones I've made are valid, is that the kid starts off first being a tattletale. He says, if you don't put the books back or don't put the dolls back, I'm going to tell mother. And he becomes a tattletale, or what you might call a think. And that's the predecessor of the parent, because a little while later he's going to be saying, you got to put the books back before we can go out and play. He said, and that's what he heard from Mother, and then he comes on like Mother. He's not playing a role. He really feels it's him doing it, at least after a while. And so that's the first development of the actual parent. So they're all developed pretty early.
Well, the adult sounds like the really rational
Yes.
part then.
Yeah.
And how would you describe the child and the parent then? Are they the unstable ones?
The parent is borrowed, and that goes into the field that a lot of people call culture. There's a certain way to be a parent in each culture, and there are certain information the parent has in each culture, which is not rational, it's just tradition. And the adult, as you say, is the rational part. In our way of thinking, the adult is very much like a computer. It takes in information and works out the best possible solution in view of what's really out there in reality.
Unemotionally?
Unemotionally, regardless of what Mother said, Father said, what I want to do, or I wish, or I should have, like that. It's just how do you fix a car? Well, it doesn't matter whether your father or mother like cars, or you wish you had a bigger car. The problem is, what are you going to do with that car? And in order to fix it, you got to take it apart and look at it and put it together again. And that's a sort of a computer thing. The child is the spontaneous part of the personality, which is creative, which sees things in a naive, rather charming way, and which asks very pertinent questions. And then the child gradually gets snowed under, mostly by the parents, and starts accepting answers which are not straight, or forgetting questions which would be interesting because you're not supposed to ask them. And that's how the child gets corrupted.
Eric Berne has made Carmel his base for the development of transactional analysis. Although he commutes to San Francisco each week to maintain a practice there, he returns to Carmel each weekend to enjoy the peace of this rugged coast with its boiling ocean and capricious fog.
I haven't asked you up till now, but you call this transactional analysis. Just what exactly is a transaction?
Transaction is what I guess other people might call an interaction. But to me, interaction is sort of a non-committal word. It means that the person is just watching and isn't going to commit himself to anything. When you say transaction, you're committing yourself to the idea that people talk to each other because they're getting something out of it. And so you can move immediately on to the question of what are they getting out of it. Very simple example, if two people say hello to each other, we assume they're saying it for a good reason and that they're each getting something out of it, or they wouldn't bother to do it. And that hello is a very simple transaction, like you say hello to me and I answer hello. And it's very deceptive because although it's simple, it's a very important transaction, as you can find out by not answering somebody if they say hello to you, and you get yourself into real trouble because it is actually a very important transaction. You say hello for somebody to answer you.
You're also listening to how hearty they are when they're saying hello.
Right.